Hello YouTube, Derek Rougeau here with Rougeau Knives, and I'm here to give you a shop tour. And first of all, let's start with the compressor. I had a smaller compressor and I was using it to start experimenting with sandblasting, and it just wasn't enough power. And the compressor kept running all the time and it was going to burn it out. So I upgraded to this, and this is working great. Now I'm able to use it for other things. Filling the tires up and other projects, so I'm not just using it for the knife making, which is handy. The sandblast cabinet, I picked this up and I went in and I caulked everything, all the seams, so that it wouldn't leak as bad. It still leaks. You can see the brown oxide, aluminum oxide dust everywhere, but not too bad. If I hadn't have done that, it would have been all over the place. And then also install the light. So that you can see what you're doing, and then a small shop vac that plugs into the side of it that sucks out any kind of extra dust that's floating around as you're blasting. That way you can see what you're doing better. So sandblasting, I'm glad I got into it. I'm using the gun coat finishes, and you need a sandblaster to do a good job of doing the gun coat. So you sandblast it, then you spray it. So the compressor, I'm using airbrush and spraying guns, to spray the gun coat on it, and then you bake it. I have my network of lines that are going from into the shop, and then here, and then just your hose, and then the sandblast cabinet. I had an electrician come in and install a sub panel here, and this is pretty much all the electrical that I need for the shop, and then your kiln, the grinder, eventually a better milling machine and lathe, and of course the compressor. So that's this setup here, and we'll move on to my heat treating setup. Okay, so this is my heat treating setup. I have my even heat kiln. This is a 27-inch deep kiln, and then I had the cart made. I drew up some blueprints for the cart and the quench tank, and because my space is so limited, I wanted to be able to cram it in this corner and at the same time be able to keep it mobile so I can roll it around. The kiln, I went with the 27-inch because I can do some longer pieces. For instance, the wakizashi, this is something I had started, and I can do some wakizashis. Got my storage rack down there, and then I got some heavy machetes that I'm going to be working on, and then some short tactical swords. And these pieces were all cut with a water jet process. It's a 1095, and then I had it water jet cut from a large sheet. And normally I don't like to do that kind of stuff, but to bandsaw all this and to grind all this would just take forever, and it would have made the piece really expensive when I turn around to sell it. So I decided to go ahead and have it cut. So the kiln, and then my quenching oil's down here. I put a lid on it so that way I can keep it clean. Got my basket, thermostat, and then back here I have two water heaters mounted in each tank. There's a divider, so I have two different types of oils here. And all I have to do is plug it in, and it starts heating the oil for me. I had a guy that works on deep fryers, and he set this up for me. So it turns on when the oil hits 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And then it's supposed to shut off at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. But the range isn't quite working out. We didn't find that out until after it was all done. So I have to kind of manually plug it and unplug it. But it's really not that bad. It works great. It only takes 15 minutes to heat the oil. But I do have to heat both oils at the same time, because the oil on one side acts as a heat sink and it just sucks all the heat into the other side, so it's better just to heat them all at once. 15 minutes, you're ready to quench. He did add a safety on it, so there's a thermostat on there, so if it ever reaches 180 degrees, it automatically turns off the power so it doesn't overheat and it catches on fire in case I'm off doing something else and I get distracted and forget about it. So that's a nice safety feature. Added some drainage plugs here just in case I need to drain it. The oil I'm using is Parks. This is Parks number 50. And when I got into heat treating, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to really take it seriously and not use olive oil or mineral oil or anything like that. So it took a lot of research, and I finally found someone that was selling the Parks oils. So the Parks 50 I use for the carbon steels, 10 series mainly in Damascus, and it quenches very quickly, and that's what you need. And then I have the Parks AAA, which is a slower quench, and that's for 5160, you know, your carbon alloys, 01 tool steels, stuff like that. So it's nice to have the two different oils and be able to do your quenching with those oils and really achieve your full hardness. You also can use the AAA to quench stainless steel, but I don't use oil to quench stainless steel. Instead, I have aluminum plates right here, and I picked these up at a metal recycling yard, and they just happen to have a big block of it, big bar of it, and I cut it in half and mounted on this. So when I pull the stainless steel blade out, I stick it in here and then clamp it down, and just apply some pressure to it, and then the aluminum acts as a heat sink, and it just draws all the heat out quickly, and it does get the stainless steel really hard. So that's my quenching process on stainless steels. I also use the foil wrap, which I got a big roll of it here. So the stainless steel foil, you wrap your blade in it, make sure it's all sealed correctly, and then that way no air gets in it. So when you quench it in the plate and you pull it out, it's nice and pretty clean. You don't have a lot of scaling, discoloration, which you got to go back and sand all that off later. Let's see. Then we have my edge quenching jig here, so that these are bolts, so you can screw it in and out, so you can raise this in the oil, and you pull your blade out. Typically 5160, I do some edge quenching. And then this would be in the oil, and you just lay the blade in the oil, establish your height, and then just roll it on there, and then you can do your edge quenching. And this has been drilled out so that you get a lot of circulation with your oil, and then these rotate to screw this plate up and down on these bolts. So let's see, that's about it. Oh, I did start experimenting with this. This is Brunel's non-scaling compound. I keep this bucket, and then I put some in here, drilled some holes in this, and then the way it works is it helps prevent scaling. So when you pull the blade out of the kiln, your carbon steel or whatever, you want to pull it out at 400 degrees. That's what they recommend, and then you sprinkle this on it on all sides, and then you put it back in, and then you bring it up to full temperature, pull it out, quench it, and then if you need to straighten it or whatever, and then after that point, then you just scrape off the compound. It's almost like a glaze, like a ceramic glaze that builds up on the blade. So then afterwards, you just scrape it off. I found that when the kiln gets to 400 degrees and you pull the knife out, it's not hot enough to use this yet. So after playing around with it, I figured out that at 600 degrees in the kiln, that's when you pull it out. You take this, you sprinkle it on it, and it seals the blade so that it won't scale up when the air hits it when you bring it out at full temperature. So I'm still experimenting with it. I've had some luck with it. I also had some problems with it, but I think I just need to work with it a little bit more to get used to it. So of course I got my gloves that I use when I'm working with the kiln. Got your tongs to grab your steel out of there. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of, I'm not going to talk about the process of heat treating and how it all works. I may do some videos on that, maybe heat treating stainless and then heat treating like 5160 carbon alloy. So, but for now it's just kind of an overview of the setup I have and what I'm using. So when I make my Kydex sheaths, you know, you're doing eyelets a lot, and I was using the little anvil and the punch and hammering them, and it was just a little inconsistent. So I ended up going with a little press here, and then I bought the dies for the eyelets, 3/16 and then 1/4 inch, and they're just coming out a lot cleaner, and it's faster. And then I also bought some flaring dies for thong holes. So that's that. This stuff here, Satanite, is a refractory cement used in forges, fireplaces, furnaces, stuff like that. I bought a 5-gallon drum of it, and that was about 55 bucks, and I got enough here for, well, I don't think I'll ever have to buy it again. And basically what you do is you mix this with water, and you come up with a paste consistency of like peanut butter, and then you can paint it on the blade, and then you can create waves, little spikes, or whatever you want, whatever pattern you want. So whatever is stuck to the blade is not going to get fully hardened when you heat treat it. So what you do is, once you paint it on, you let it dry, you stick it in the kiln, you bring it up to temperature, and you quench it. And what happens is anything exposed gets to its full hardness, and then the sections that are being painted with Satanite is actually a little softer, more pliable. And you may recognize this process through the samurai swords that are being made, and the transitional pattern or temper that it creates is called a hamon. So this is what I use. Once again, this was a little tricky to find. Go on the internet, you can find it. It's not that hard, but it took a little bit of research. So this is my main workbench. As you can see, I have a small vise over here. I have a Dremel here with one of their snakes. I actually burned out one of these Dremels already, and then I replaced it. And this motor on this Dremel is already starting to smoke on me. So I ended up buying a Fortum. And the Fortum is just a lot more powerful. You got more torque. It's sturdier. You got a foot switch down here and a nice chuck. So that's a nice piece there. I have this anvil. I don't do any forging. I just don't have the room. I had a small forge and I ended up selling it. But just don't have the space. I do stock removal exclusively. But this anvil does come in handy. I do use it from time to time. And then of course you got your tools and everything. Little small tools and jigs and stuff that I use from time to time. Over here I have these small bins, and this has turned out to be really handy. I marked each one as far as what grit of sandpaper it is, and then I go in and I cut them down into small manageable pieces. And when you're sitting here and you're sanding for hours, I mean, you're able to just reach over and grab that stuff, and that's really handy. And of course you got your chemicals and your glues and everything else up there. And these are my hoses here for hooking up my airbrushes and spray guns, my regulator, and it's connected to the compressor. This sheet I ended up creating, which basically has your most common sizes of measurement. And it's a good visual reference sometimes when you're thinking about, well, how thick is something? And you can just look over and see a round dot and a square dot, and it just lets you know how big something is visually, and sometimes that's just helpful as a quick reference. Here you can see I have my small welding kit. I don't need anything big. I don't do that much welding, but it is important to have a kit like this, so I went small. I just don't have a lot of space. So here's my metal cutting bandsaw. I added a little plate here, well, work rest. Your bandsaw needs to be really slow for it to be able to cut metal, and I can cut 1/4 inch stainless steel with this, and it gets me by. I'd like to upgrade it one day, but for now it works. And then I have this little milling machine I picked up for like 150 bucks. It allows me to slot my guards, do some little projects here and there, but nothing heavy. The motor in this thing is just not powerful enough. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not making folders right now. I need to upgrade this to be able to tackle making folders. So as you can see here, I have this flyer hanging up. This is the milling machine, lathe, and drill press combo that I want to get. A lot of guys say, you don't want to get one of these because they're a pain in the ass to switch from milling to lathing. But I'm doing more milling than lathing, and I'm working with a lot of small parts. So I think this will do the job for my situation. And also it will fit my shop. So that's important because I do not have a lot of space. But I just got to come up with the money and then pay for freight, and then also figure out how to get it in my shop because I'm going to need a forklift. So this is entirely another project that needs to be done down the road. So this is my main toolbox in the shop. Got my timer here, little kitchen timer that I use for timing stuff. This is my cutting drawer, all my bits and cutters and everything for milling and all that stuff. Then down here, just basic tools. I'm going to go through this real quickly. I don't want to bore you with it. All my pin stock, everything. Rotary tools. All the bits and stuff. Taps, other things. I mean, I got quite a bit of stuff floating around. And then some other tools and whatnot. Vises, files, any sharpening stuff, sharpening knives, some welding stuff, supplies, and small tools. So this here is my my other workstation. I really, it's odd, but I really like this piece that I got. I went to a tile store and I asked them if they had any flat marble surfaces that I can purchase from. Then they go, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And I said, "Well, that's perfect." And I said, "What do you want for it?" And they said, "Oh, just take it. You can have it." Well, I thought that was pretty cool. So whenever you get stuff free, it's always a good deal. So over here, I have a disc grinder, disc sander. And it is variable speed, and you can run it forward and backwards, so that's kind of nice. Then I have my buffer and 2 different wheels on it. And then here I have my drill press. I only have 1 drill press right now. The milling machine I have now can be used as a drill press, but when I upgrade to the bigger milling machine, that will help. So then it would be a true second drill press, and but it gets me by. Over here I have another bandsaw, and I just kind of use this for cutting wood and antler, especially if I'm doing a lot of it. So it just speeds things up. It's just a cheapie. And then over here I have the spindle sander, and this comes in pretty handy because a lot of my designs I do with finger notches. And so, as long as I design it correctly, my patterns, then I can get into these spots and really smooth all this out. Come into these corners and really make that nice, finish that nice. So this is handy. It does eat up these sanders really fast, so it can get a little pricey because you're constantly buying sleeves for this thing. And like I said earlier, you really burn through the spindle sander replacement discs. So I buy in bulk, and it saves me a little bit of money. Okay, now to the main piece of any shop for a knife maker would be a grinder. 2 by 72 inch belt grinder is practically a must-have. This one here I picked up used, got a really good deal on it. This is an 8-inch contact wheel. Has a 2 horsepower motor and then variable speed. And variable speed for me, I never used one without variable speed. I can only imagine what a pain in the ass it would be not to have it, and so I'm just really glad I have variable speed. I have work rests for this. This arm pops up here, and you can mount your work rests, of course, and you can angle it and do all that. And also I have a lot of other attachments for this, and I'll show that to you. So when I bought the grinder, I ended up getting some other wheels with it. One, typically any grinder you get, you're going to get your flat platen and a small 3-inch wheel, so you can do some really tight hollow grinding if you want. And then this is a 12-inch wheel, which is really nice. So that allows me to bring my grind lines even higher up on the side of a knife, so I can go up a full inch on a quarter inch piece of steel. So that I'm really glad I ended up getting that in the deal. And here we have a collection of buffing wheels, and pretty much enough said. And here, just gloves, my respirator, more supplies. And then down here I have my little toaster, so heat up my kydex. And there, larger pieces I have to do it in the kitchen. So if I'm making a sheath for a machete, I have to actually do it in the kitchen oven. This here is my little, flat sander and a little disc. It comes in handy. But the motor's pretty weak, but it does the job. Now, as far as dust collection, I had set this up so that it sucks all the dust down in there and all the metal particles. And it gets sucked over here and into this bucket full of water, so it quenches it, but basically puts out any hot sparks, and that way it doesn't travel through the system and into the shop vac. And this is working out pretty good. I used a shop vac hose on this, and I have to be careful. I have to keep it clean because the particles do get trapped in there and they can start a fire. So I have to keep an eye on that. And then as you can see in the back there, the hose pops up, and I'm also catching the ambient dust. And this helps a lot. If I didn't have this, my shop would be a mess. It still gets pretty dirty, but this system is working well for me. And of course, every shop needs a fire extinguisher. Now, I decided not to mount my vise on a table or a workbench anywhere. I wanted to keep it mobile, so I built this stand, and also it allows me to store my hammers and stuff down here. But it gives me the flexibility to move this thing around, and I can get close in on it. This swivels, and I can really get in a good comfortable position and work with it. I also put this drill press vise down here, so I have a horizontal vise where I can grab bar stock and other things like that. If I don't have my feet on the side of the thing holding it, it rocks a little bit. So as you're sanding, it will move a bit, but if you're really locked in and you lock your legs in, then it helps stabilize it. But this works really well for me, and keeping it mobile, I'm able to move it in, say, outside and use it on other projects. So I like this setup. So I also have this vise that it's also portable. I mounted it on this melamine board, which makes it really stable. I mean, this thing doesn't move. And then I'm able to establish, I can put my knives within a vise like this, have the blade stick out here, and then this holds the blade in place, and then I'm able to sand without it flexing and bending on me. So another vise, really flexible. Then I got one over here in the corner, and this comes in handy as well. So these vices here, like I was mentioning earlier, you can establish them at any height within here once you clamp it down, and then you have your board to hold the knife to keep it from wobbling. But I used to use this one a lot, and then I started getting into doing a lot of cord wraps. So I ended up picking one of these up. And this one here, say if I wanted to do a cord wrap on this, once I get it in there and lock it into place and loosen this, then while this is locked in there, I can spin this around as I'm working on the cord. And as you do one side, you flip it over, you do the other side, and this helps a lot. So I really like this vise, and this is my my new sanding and cord wrapping vise. So there's a training DVD out there on file work, and the knife maker that did the video ended up designing something very similar to this. So I made one, and it's really a good idea. So you put it in a vise, hold it in place, and then if if you want to do file work on the back of a knife, you place it in here and then you just lock it into place. And then that gives you the flexibility to file at a 45-degree angle, and you're not hitting, say, the side of this vise here, otherwise you couldn't do it. So this gives you a good, and also when you're standing you can move around it and you get a good angle, a lot of flexibility. So this vise here, kudos to him, it was a good idea. So what I'm going to show you here is how I straighten my knives. I had purchased a block of micarta, and then I had just cut it, a nice arc, and then ground it. And then I drilled holes in the back and mounted these rare earth magnets in there. And that allows me to put this in the metal jaws of my vise, and it holds it in place. So let's say I heat treated this knife, I quenched it, and it's now it's been quenched, but it's still pretty hot, say 500 degrees, 400 degrees, right around there. I'll bring it over here quickly and find the point where it has a bend in it, and then I'll mark it with a marker if I need to, and then place it so that the peak is pointing towards the bend, and then you just take the vise and you crank it down and you just put some pressure and you work it to straighten out the blade. And then after that I loosen it up, take it out, put it on the marble slab I have over there, and double check that it's flat. And then if there's still some bends in it, then I'll go in and mark it, come back here, do it again, and keep doing that until the blade gets straight. So this is my knife straightening jig, easy to use. You do have to buy some micarta. You probably can use some hardwood, you can get away with it. You know, the blade does singe the micarta a bit, but who cares? You know, it's not going to burn it. So, anyways, there you go. Now, when you're working with blades, you obviously don't want to put a blade in here and then clamp it down, because it's gonna dent it and scratch the hell out of it. So you want to put some sort of soft protective material in here. You can buy rubber or nylon vise protection blocks that go in here, but you know, I work with leather a lot, so I just make a little piece of leather, stick it in there, tape it down, and as it gets damaged you can just replace it cheaply, easily. So another jig I use is a file jig, and I've already set this up here just for speed things up. You put a hidden tang knife in here, and where the guard rests against the back of your ricasso or the knife here, you want it to be really perfectly flat, so it just fits flat. You can buy one of these. They're not cheap. I mean, they're like 60 bucks, I think. And this is hardened steel, so as you file, it's not going to wear this out. But your blade's annealed and soft, so it's going to be able to file that out and get it flat. So you'd stick it in your vise and you would work on that, get that nice and square, and then you can pull it out, and then now you got this nice square area for your guard to rest right against. So these are handy. Another little trick I picked up was whatever screws I'm going to use on a say a knife scale. Say this is a knife scale, it's already drilled, and you've already shaped it, and you want to work on sanding it. Well, if you're holding it and you're sanding it, boy, your wrist and your hand just really get fatigued very quickly. So a cool technique is taking the screws you're going to use and then an extended post that's threaded, and then you just run it through the scale and then screw it in, snug it down, and then you do another one on this side, stick it in your vise, and then you can elevate it, clamp it down, and now it's secure. You can use both hands, and you can go in and start sanding and working that and cleaning it up real nice. So that helps a lot. So I had picked this stool up at a recycle yard, and I mounted it on a wood board and put rollers on it, and it acts as a storage unit. And also when I grind, I like to actually sit down. I've tried grinding standing up, and when you're standing there, you have a slight sway to yourself. And when I'm sitting, I'm able to lock my arms in and grind much better. You know, just storage. And then this bin here is all my sandpaper. And of course I got all labeled and everything. And this is really handy. So these are the large sheets, and then I use the small bins. Cut it up, put it in the small bins for when I'm sitting at the table. So a little roller stool. So in here, this is a lot of my abrasives. These are shop rolls. You just tear off a strip, different grits, and then you can kind of work pieces. I got a bunch of that. But this is 400 grit automotive adhesive sandpaper, and it's adhesive on the back. So if you get a pad like this, you can stick it on there, rip off a piece, and then this is flat, but still cushy enough so when you sand, you get a nice good finish, and it just makes sanding a lot easier. And then when you're done, you just peel off your old sheet and add a new one. So I have several different grits. This process is really helpful for me. I really like the way this works out. So these are some of the sanding blocks I use. I got different kinds. I got these hard rubber pads that I use, and I round off some of the radiuses here. This one's round off, so I can get in tight corners and work stuff. Once again, the adhesive automotive abrasive comes in handy with using blocks like this. So I'll cut off a piece, and then you can just stick it onto something, whatever you want to use, and then you don't have to hang on to it like you would a sandpaper. So if you wrap this around like this and you're sanding, it's moving, it's shifting, it just gets a little sloppy. So this helps, so you can do your sanding. These blocks here, I marked them. This is for my 12-inch wheel. So I found the correct radius. This is my Carta, and then I sanded it nice and smooth. And so when I do a grind, for instance, on this knife here, I used an 8-inch wheel. So then I would take and cut off a piece of my tape, put it on here, and then I would just go in and start working, sanding this here. And it is at the correct radius. So this matches my 8-inch wheel. So that's how I do that. So I have made 2 Kydex presses. I made a large one for machetes and whatnot. And then I have a small one here that I use for all my knives. And basically it's just melamine board. I tried using plywood and it started warping real bad, so melamine board is holding up really well. And then I did buy the Kydex foam. You can get them at some of the knife maker stores. So I did start using that. And then what I do is once you heat up your blade and you wrap it with the Kydex, you heat the Kydex and you put your blade and you wrap it, then you stick it in here, close your press, and then I put it in this vise here, and then you just crank it down until you get a nice tight fit, and then let it sit for I typically it's about 8 minutes, and then pull it out, and you've just created a Kydex sheath. So as you can see, regarding my 2x72-inch sanding belts, I got them hanging here. These are the ones that I'm actually in process of using, and then I got some more hanging here. So they're kind of strewed all over the place. And now we're in the clean room. That's what I call it, part of my shop here. And these are all the new belts and specialty belts that I use. So I have quite an inventory. It's better to buy in bulk because they're not cheap. So here we have my hardness tester. I'm not going to get into how this all works right now. I'll probably be doing some heat treating videos in the future, so I'll explain that later. And then this is just another area where, it's my I call it the clean room, and it's just another work area. If I'm working with leather or whatnot, then I'll be working in here. File drawers for leather, Kydex, all kinds of materials. And then my steel storage. some of the smaller pieces, Damascus and whatnot, get put in there. Antler. I'm just going to go through this really quick here. And then just supplies, storage, things of that nature. Some handle material and some more materials. And my zombie on the door. And this here is my job board. So if you look to the left, that's all the blades that need to be heat treated, and right down the middle, everything on the right is been heat treated. So I have quite a few knives to finish. Then if we look in here in this drawer, these are some of the knives that I have profiled, and I just need to finish them. So I've started a lot of projects. These are some of the test blades I'm starting to do. So I'm actually getting involved in creating some test blades and heat treating them and then torture testing them. And the one bent there, that's 01 tool steel. And yeah, well, I'll cover that in another video. And this is my toolbox of all my leather working tools. So, nothing overly special, but it's all the stuff you need to work with leather. So I appreciate you watching my videos. I hope this has been informative, give you an idea of what's involved in knife making. I appreciate all your comments. Keep them coming. And feel free to visit my website. Got a lot of knives for sale. Thanks again.